Welcome to Coltham House Estate, set just outside the city of Coltham in the rural English county of Coltshire. Previously the domain of Lord Jonathan Coltham, following his passing, it has passed down to his son Horace, the now Lord of Coltham. Horace is less inclined, however, to keeping the estate in its current status quo. A renowned animal enthusiast known for his eccentric ways and bold ideas, he has set out to bring a far more interesting source of income to the estate and its holdings. His current business advisor, Daniel Fjord of Ford, Fjord & Sword, has already set to work creating plans for opening up the estate as a venue for weddings and events, along with the conversion of part of the house into a hotel. Horace, however, has had other ideas, seeing the opportunity to continue his passion of exploring the world, tasking Daniel to put together a plan for a new zoological experience for the people of Coltshire. It's with this plan in mind that Horace has brought in Luke Warren, his previous guide on his journey around the world, to handle day-to-day animal care as his head keeper. Now, while construction begins on the entrance plaza and car parks, Luke's first task is to turn Lord Coltham's already established insect collection into something that can get money rolling on into the future zoo, with the creation of a brand new insect house. Now, before we get started, if you're a fan of everything creepy and crawly, tap the like button. If you would rather you didn't have to spend the next 20 minutes hitching all over, also tippy tap the like button. Alternatively, pop the bug emoji down in the comments below, all for the sake of engagement. And with that in hand, let's jump on into our very first episode of Wildlands. So welcome to our brand new zoo. I've been so excited to get this started and really happy that we're finally underway. Now, today's episode is going to be a fairly short one. We're just going to get our initial insect house set up, basically just to start generating some money so that we can start really building this zoo out. I'm not going to do too much on the franchise area in this episode, just purely because with them being exhibits, there's not a whole lot of franchise work that needs doing. However, next episode onwards, we will certainly be diving a lot more into the management side as well as just building. Now, we've started off by moving the entrance gates and the ticket barriers over to our temporary entrance area here. This is basically just there to give us somewhere to start off with for our entrance building, which we'll be building next episode. Don't want to spend too much money on this at the moment, just because we'll run out of cash to get our exhibits placed. Next up, we're going to start mapping out an area. Now, I had this in mind as to how I wanted the flow around this building to go. But in order to make sure everything fits, we're going to place down the exhibit boxes first, and then we're going to build the building around them. To start us off, we're going to bring in two new habitants for our first exhibit, and that is the Amazonian giant centipede. So I've gone through, found some with some fairly good stats. This is kind of a breeding farm, but as you can see here, these guys are actually quite cute if you're into that sort of thing. What I will put down is I'm going to put a little icon on the screen, certainly when we get to the spiders, for those of you not too much of a fan of our 8-legged friends. But these ones are good, right? They've got many legs. Next up, we have our leaf insects. These two are an absolute pain to find, as you'll see in the cinematics. These took ages. I was going round and round and round before I found them on the floor here, looking like leaves, so clearly the camouflage works. So as we're building these in, I've opened up the zoo just to start generating a bit of cash. You can see down the bottom there, these exhibit boxes are not cheap. And you will find that when you first start out, placing a load of them like I did here was a challenge. Two new beetles next. We've got our Goliath beetle and our Titan beetle. These guys were a little bit more animated than the leaf insects at least, and were a little bit easier to find. Okay, moving on. Now that we've got our general layout sort of in mind, we're going to start popping down some floors. So I'm going to finish off the whole outside template of the building with these concrete floors. We're lowering them down just low enough that they cover the path. And then we're going to follow all the way around the outside of the building with these stone bricks. Now, on this front side, the plan I have for the entrance to the zoo basically has most of this building covered in a giant mound. A lot of zoos do this now just to sort of give them that ecological look. So we're going to start off by just putting in a giant mound of dirt, and then we're going to use the terrain tools to sculpt our way into it and slowly build it into a gradual hillside, which in our next episode, when we do our front entrance and our car parks, this is all going to get decorated up with some plant life and really blend into the building. Spend a bit of time getting this right, just smoothing it out, popping in a bit of lumps and bumps, and just blending it into the surrounding terrain. Now moving on, we're going to start decorating up our exhibit boxes, and we're going to start off using the faux aquatic rocks. I've turned these into a sort of tropical, warm, sandy red colour, and we're going to use the longer pieces and these little bricks just to build around all of our exhibit boxes. The open backs of the habitats, rather than closing them off using the cover that comes with the exhibit boxes, we're going to instead build our own backgrounds so that the boxes look a lot bigger than they are. So to start off in this corner, we're going to make a bit of a tropical rainforest scene, just with some rocks to start with and some aquatic trees. Good old faux rock trick with the trees there to get a nice mud wall effect. I'm just going to build it up, and again we're going to fill this with plants very shortly, but for now we're just going to build it through with rock work. In this little empty space that we had between the exhibits, we're going to build ourselves a little water feature, something just to catch the eye as you're walking through. And we're going to start off by building a rock face, just submerging little rocks into the bigger rocks to give ourselves a bit of a bumpy texture to work with. Now, if you've seen my other videos, you'll know I don't really ever have that much inspiration to hand when I'm building. I just kind of throw stuff at it until it looks right, and that's very much what I was doing here. This entire insect house and a lot of this zoo is going to be very heavily inspired by my experiences here in the UK at a lot of British zoos. And this sort of insect house, where it's very dark, very low, very close, everything's sort of built up into like a cave system, and then the only sources of light are the exhibits, is very reminiscent of a lot of British zoos. You get this a lot, and I suppose a lot of Western zoos as well do it. But this is very much inspired by quite a few of the zoos that I've been to in my local area, where a lot of the habitats are going to be inside just because of the way the weather works here. We popped in a couple of giant cockroaches next, and our first arachnid. Hope you saw that little flashy spider icon there, just to warn you. Now, in the centre of our insect house, we're going to have a canopy of leaves coming across the heads of all the visitors. To do that, we've got to anchor it with a tree. So this central exhibit, which is going to house our giant land snails, is going to have this big tree going up through it. Now this works really well with the giant land snails because they tend to climb mainly on the glass of the habitat, so you don't really risk hiding them too much with the scenery that you're adding to the exhibit. And just to cover up the more modern sides, we're going to build ourselves a little wooden podium. That's going to go all the way round and also all the way around the top of the glass, just to hide in the height of these exhibits. The big point of this entire insect house is making these exhibits look smaller so that they look a bit more realistic. And here's our two giant land snails now, giant African land snails I should say, and they don't really move much. I did film them for a while, didn't move much. So on to planting. This is where we're starting with our water feature here, and just like that we're going to fill it with plants. Now this is very much using tropical plants, and again you'll find this used amongst this zoo series quite a lot. Inside the buildings we can bring in a lot of these more temperate plants that will not fare very well out in the Great British winter. We're also going to use a lot of these plant panels, so these are going to go in the backgrounds and be submerged into the rocks. And the idea here is that that's just going to add a little bit of greenery, a bit like a moss wall would. Now, whilst most of our exhibits are rainforest related, some of them are based out in the desert. So in this back corner, we've just done the same idea with some desert rock, and now we're just going to add a couple of desert specific plants. There's only 2 exhibits that have desert dwelling animals in them, but they're sort of off in this back corner. And you'll see when it's all lit up that actually this area is a lot brighter for that. Here we have probably the most animated animal in one of our exhibits, the scarab beetle, doing what he does best and rolling that little ball of dung about his exhibit. We also have over this side the desert scorpion. Could only find one. I had 2 in this habitat, but I literally, no matter what I did, could not find the other one. But here's this little guy here, almost giving us a little wave. Now, I mentioned earlier that the idea of having this canopy go over the head of the visitors, well, we're going to need something to hang that off of. So I'm going to bring this netting all the way across, just at about the height of the top of the rockwork. So again, this is also going to help reduce the height of those exhibit boxes by covering over so you don't see the tops of them. You can also sort of see in the background there, I've brought the education boards, flipped them upside down and raised them into the ceiling so that essentially they're little information panels. I will get round to flipping the pictures on those. I'm going to do an episode on basically doing all the banners and all of the little infotainment screens for the zoo in a future episode, and we'll run through and get those changed then as well. Now we're going to pop a roof on here. This is going to be a fairly indescript roof. The main reason being is it's going to have that mud mound come up to it on two sides of the building, and then inside, just to keep it feeling fairly low and compact, we're going to put in a fake roof. And you find this happens quite a lot in these sort of habitat buildings, just to keep the heat in, keep the humidity high. So this is just going to go all the way across, just a little bit above that netting. Now, a big spider warning at this point. I went back and added the rest of the exhibit habitants, starting with the giant forest scorpion, our Goliath bird-eating spider, shown here in all her glory. Once again, giving us a little bit of a wave there. We have the salmon pink tarantula, and finally, the Brazilian wandering spider, all in their exhibits, all available to be seen. To finish off, as you'll see in the ending cinematics, I've gone pretty crazy with the lighting in here. We've got a heavy amount of lighting over in the desert area, and then everywhere else we've got these spotlights, as well as lights to light up the ceiling from below. And then I've put some in the floor as well, just to guide the visitors through the insect house. In my experience, these places generally tend to be quite dark, but obviously for the sake of being able to film it, we needed to get quite a bit of lighting in there. Bit of decoration just to go in now then, so I've put in a aircon system that will keep the humidity and the heat quite high. Even though the exhibits are sealed boxes, the idea is in these places you tend to find that you get a lot of similar environments created for the guests to experience as they walk through. We're just going to make a little metal frame, and I love this conservation ducting, and you'll probably be seeing a lot of it in most of the buildings I make. I think it adds a lovely little background detail. And then we finished off with just a little bit of planting into our forest canopy here. Most of these would likely be faux plants, just more for the guests to see, but the end result is certainly worth having these little extra pops of colour in there, as well as a bit of tidies up everywhere. And here we have it in its wonderful lit glory. I've had to turn it to night to get the full effect. Really happy with how this turned out. It's certainly a lot more than just a basic exhibit farm stuffed away at the side of the zoo. I'm going to leave you with a couple of cinematics now, just of a few walkthroughs and how it all looks from the guest perspective. Hope you enjoyed our first episode of Wildlands. Many, many more on the way. Next episode we'll be tackling the entrance and the car park, as well as a gift shop, staff area, getting our first habitat animal in and starting one of our first big walkthrough habitat. I'm really excited about the series, and I can't wait to show off all of the things that I've got planned. If you're enjoying it, make sure you hit the subscribe button below, give the like button a tappy tap, and I will see you in episode 2 next week. Bye guys.